Welcome everyone to another InRhythm Lightning Talk. I'm your host, Ted Parton. I'm the lead tech community evangelist here. This week we have James Putman talking to us about using Pulumi with Python, and hopefully I said that right, James. And that's an alternative tool to Terraform that's been out since about 2018. Also, I want to remind everyone that we're almost done with our spring summit, which is where we're bringing in a series of workshops. We took this week off, but next week we have a workshop by our Android practice on Tuesday, and that's going to be going over Kotlin mobile multi-platform mobile. And on next Thursday, our Java practice will be going over using gRPC, and we hope you guys will join us for that. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. James, who's going to tell us all about Pulumi.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction, Ted. So welcome to another lightning talk here at InRhythm. So today we're going to be talking about Pulumi, automating infrastructure as code, and we're going to be using Python with this demo. So cover a couple things in this demo. First off, what is Pulumi? What is Pulumi? How does it work? Why should you use it? We're gonna have some links. We'll also have a demo, and then we'll follow up with some questions. So what is Pulumi? So Pulumi is an infrastructure as code tool. So infrastructure as a code is a way for kind of to deploy your infrastructure items. You can define them within either YAML file, things like that, but it basically makes this process a lot more efficient, because you think like back in the day, whenever we're provisioning resources, they had to do it by hand. A lot of manual effort went into that. And so Pulumi is an infrastructure as a code tool, much like Terraform, like Ted was saying, to try and solve this problem. But more specifically, Pulumi it uses a general purpose language. So if you're familiar with Terraform, Terraform uses a proprietary language, it's HashiCorp language. So you do have to have some familiarity with that before you can use Terraform. Now, Pulumi, on the other hand, because it's language agnostic. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, if you're familiar with Go, Python, it makes it very easy to adopt. So you have to do a little bit of learning, depending on where you want to deploy these resources, maybe AWS, Google, Azure. So you have to do a little bit of research on that. But as far as being able to code it out, if you're comfortable with one of these languages, you can jump right into it. Pulumi does offer some really nice tutorials. One of the tutorials we'll be exploring here in a little bit. So how does it work? So we kind of talked about what it is, but what's going on underneath the hood here? So we got a couple different components of Pulumi project. So the project, you can kind of think of like as a GitHub repo. The program itself is where we're going to have the code. So we're kind of drawing some analogies between kind of like, a GitHub repo and Pulumi project. The program would kind of be the code, and stacks are going to be like your environment or your branches. And so like each stack is going to contain a different state. So if you want to deploy something, say like to the production environment or to the development environment, you're going to have different configurations for these different stacks. And then over here on the side, we also have some basic Pulumi commands. Pulumi up, that's going to deploy your resources. Pulumi destroy, that's going to destroy your resources. Pulumi config, that's where you can get in, kind of configure your configuration. And the Pulumi stack will allow you to get some information on the different stacks that you have as well. And a continuation on how it works. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper in here, get a little bit more technical. So we have a couple different components that go into the Pulumi program. Starting off, we have the language host, and this is where you're going to really kind of define your resources using that general purpose language like Python in our example here. So you would define your resources within the language host. And so the language host kind of consists of two things. We have the language executor and the language runtime. So the language executor will launch the language runtime, and the language runtime communicates with the deployment engine. And so your CLI and engine, the second part right up here, is what the language runtime is going to communicate with. And so when you add new resources to your language host, and you do, say, the Pulumi up command, it's going to check with the last deployed state, so your state file, and it's going to say, okay, so we have some new resources defined here. How's our state looking? You know, what was it previous to this? Is it a new state, or are we going to be updating these resources? Are we going to be destroying these resources? So that communication goes on between the engine and the deployed state. And based on that information, we would go ahead and create, update, or delete these resources. And the providers themselves kind of implement that desired state. And this is taken care of through resource plugins, which are binaries that are used to communicate with the various providers. And the state is, so the state of these will be stored. It's either stored in the Pulumi service, which is an online service offered by Pulumi. You can configure it to store your state locally, or you can configure it to store your state in, say, an S3 bucket in Amazon AWS. So this is kind of a breakdown of the communication that goes on with Pulumi when you're deploying these resources or editing them. So if we move on to our next slide here, why should you use it? So, I mean, we've covered a lot of different things here, but really boils down to, you know, why do you care? Why should you care? There's some pros and cons here. So you can deploy infrastructure using, you know, any language that you're comfortable with. That immediately jumps out as a pro to me. You don't really have to learn a new language with it. Now, compared to Terraform, because Terraform is kind of like the other main competitor out there. So the conditional options that Terraform offers don't really compare to Pulumi. I feel like you have kind of more flexibility when you're trying to define your resources, trying to add some logic to the program itself. So that kind of coupled with the robust utility functions and types that Pulumi offers, you know, that definitely makes it a little bit more easy to work with. Plus the added benefit of being able to use your own language. Now it can integrate with Terraform providers as well. So even though there is a little bit of catch up, so Terraform offers something, and then, you know, Pulumi kind of adapts to that as well. So even though there might be a little bit of a delay, Pulumi will eventually catch up and start offering some of that. And it supports unit property and integration testing and testing frameworks. So that is definitely added benefit, whereas Terraform doesn't really match that one-to-one. It is kind of lacking in the automation department. But some cons, I mean, it's not a perfect world. So documentation, because like Ted mentioned at the beginning of this, that it was released in 2018. So Terraform definitely has a huge head start. The documentation and the community is a lot bigger than Pulumi, but Pulumi is growing. And you need to pay for Pulumi state management, like if you're going to be using the Pulumi service itself, which I mentioned earlier. Pulumi service is kind of like their online site that you can go to kind of manage your Pulumi resources. But some of those options are hidden behind kind of like a paywall. So you don't really get all those options up front with the free version. But again, like I said earlier, you can store your state file in various other areas. It doesn't have to be stored in the Pulumi service. So there are ways around that. And just general cloud details, not as good as Terraform. Like I said, that comes with maturity, but the product is growing. They have an excellent community on Slack, and documentation, and the community is getting better. So next up, we have some nice links. So the first one up there, just the main Pulumi site. We have a Pulumi blog that they update pretty often, and some nice information resources in there. Again, the Pulumi community, another place for any kind of information, and then best practices. Now, I also mentioned that there is a Slack channel, And you can find the Slack channel if you navigate to the Pulumi main website if you want to jump on that. And they also have a very good collection of examples, some nice projects that can kind of get you started, get your feet wet. And that is what we will be jumping into right now. So let me switch the old switcheroo here. Okay. So got a project pulled up here. And what we're going to do is deploy an S3 bucket to Amazon Web Services. But first, we need to do a couple things. So this is a Pulumi project that was written in Python. And you can see up here, we have to import some requirements for this project. Let's do our view. What was that? We saw this last week. All right. Now, so we need to install our requirements for this project. So when we created this project, it created a couple things for us. It created a virtual environment for us because we are using Python. And we had our catalog info.yaml file. This was created with some additional information, some metadata, what is the name of our project, a description, the repo that this is added to. This was part of a project that we had worked on last week for our DevOps workshop. So some of this information has been rehashed already, but we're going back over it again because it's fun. The Pulumi YAML file here, this is what was defined whenever we created it. We're specifying that this is a Python project and is going to be an AWS project. But right here in our main Python file is where we're going to define most of our resources. And before we do that, we need to run our requirements. There we go. So we're going to install requirements for Python to satisfy our modules up here, because we need to import these before we can actually execute it. All right. So then if we do a Pulumi up. All right, so Pulumi up is going to create our resources for us. And I'm going to pull this up here on the side just so we can see what we got going here. So in our account right now, we don't have any S3 bucket. Let's see if I can swing this back over here. There we go. All right. We don't want to enter a passphrase for this. We're just doing this for demo. All right. So while it's thinking about it, it's going to go over what our current state file is. It's going to think about what it wants to do. We do want to perform this update. And so it's telling us down here, we want to create an AWS S3 bucket. We want to call it my bucket. Do you want to perform this update? We want to, yes. So it's going to update our dev stack. All right. And so 2 resources were created. And we go back to our AWS account and hit the refresh button. There we go. So here is our bucket. All right, but here's, for some reason, we did not get the site created in it. Let's see here. Let's take a little bit. All right. Well, we did get the S3 bucket created, but not sure why the site wasn't brought up with it. Let's see here. I'm already satisfied. All right. Well, I don't know if I want to sit here and debug all this, but in a nutshell, that is how you would use Pulumi to deploy an S3 bucket to AWS. Unfortunately, right now, I'm not exactly sure why it didn't deploy the website that we had defined here, because it would have shown a Hello Pulumi site that we had defined here within the www folder. But essentially what it would have done, we create a web bucket up here. We called it the S3 workshop bucket. So if we jump back over here, oh, that would probably be why. I think we're using.
You think maybe your bucket changed, the name changed from last week to this week?
I think so. I think I might have brought in the wrong one, but at least we got our bucket up there. So as goes with software development, sometimes you run into a couple issues, but we roll with it. So that right there is just a little demo of using Pulumi with Python. Yeah, unfortunately, not exactly sure what happened with this part right here, but as you can see, it is very easy to get your resources deployed to AWS just simply by defining your resources within your main Python file and using the simple commands, Pulumi up, and there you go. So I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any questions.
James is really good. And one thing I just thought of too is, so the S3 bucket names are unique. So I'm not sure how soon you can redo them. Like if you had one up there last week and then you deleted it, I'm not sure how long until you can reuse that same name. So that could be part of the problem there. But because once you create a S3 bucket, it's unique across the entire globe on that bucket, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's really cool. How did you first learn about it, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no problem. So I first learned about it. I was given a demo over Terraform. It was earlier, I think it was late last year, actually. It might have been earlier this year. But during that project, researching for that, I was kind of researching some alternatives to Terraform, and Pulumi was one of them that I stumbled upon. And so just from learning, the pros and cons between Terraform and Pulumi, I got introduced to Pulumi and thought it was really cool. Used Terraform a little bit in the past, and just the added flexibility, being able to define it within a language that you're comfortable with, really kind of piqued my interest because I've been learning Python on the side, and so this kind of played well with learning that. So it was kind of a win-win in my eyes. Hey, talk about Pulumi some, learn more about it, and maybe one day get the opportunity to use it in the real world. But yeah, so we just went through the Pulumi destroy command, and we deleted our resources. We can see how the S3 bucket was destroyed there. Let's see.
So two things that stand out to me about it that intrigued me about it, I think I would go look at it for, is like you said, being able to use any general purpose language instead of having to go learn the Terraform syntax, right? And then I believe, as you mentioned earlier, when I have dabbled with Terraform, the conditional logic is not the best. Is almost non-existent, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
So having that conditional options that we'd have in a more general purpose languages, that's huge, I think.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it kind of boils down to, yeah, you might be able to accomplish the same thing, but you might have to add maybe a lot more lines to it. And so if you're worried about, trying to make things nice, concise, and efficient, and, uh, less manual labor involved with it, anything that kind of shortens the syntax, it makes it a lot easier, especially with developers that are clacking away, you know, all day on the keyboard, anything, any kind of shortcuts or extra, you know, shortcuts, less keys to have to clack away at. You know, it's going to make the developers a lot happier. But yeah, I will. I'll have to look into this, kind of see where things went awry in this part, but at least we're able to get the S3 bucket deployed to Amazon. That's the main thing. But I will see. I can find the link that we pulled this demo from, and I'll be sure to include it in the LinkedIn the LinkedIn one. So for those folks that are watching, if you'd like to go through this demo on your own, you're more than welcome to.
That's right. As James mentioned earlier, we last week there was a DevOps workshop in which part of that was working with this Pulumi demo here, and so we have a good portion of this already in a public repo to do a hands-on piece, and so we will get that added to LinkedIn and can get that to anyone who would like a copy of it. So. Are there any more questions for James today, or do we have any comments from LinkedIn? Go ahead. Go ahead, Gregory.
There's a question in the chat from Brian.
It says, Brian says, have you activated the visual? Have you activated the visual environment? Maybe that's the question.
Oh, have I activated the virtual environment?
Oh, maybe that's the virtual. Okay, I got you.
I don't think. I don't think I did. Mission activated. What is the Python environment activation, Brian? Do you know off the top of your head? See, I thought that it created it and activated it already during the initialization of the project, but where's my environment at?
A good example of what happens when we're actually coding, right?
Yeah, no, this is good. This is good. I mean, you know, everybody sees all the pretty stuff, but nobody ever really gets to look behind the scenes to see the struggles that go on. All right, Brian.
He thinks you're done with the activation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, yeah, we are in the virtual environment down here. So let me give it one more shot. Oh, hey, look at that. Maybe it will work. Okay, I think, Brian, I think you're onto something. Let me try this one more time. Oh, accidentally hit the wrong key. All right. So we're gonna deploy this. We're gonna update. Okay, I think we're onto something. Brian, you saved the day. Give that man a gold star. All right, we're gonna navigate back to our Chrome. And then so many windows. All right. So if we do a quick refresh. All right, there we go. That's what's up. Okay, awesome. So now you can see that we actually have our S3 bucket with the correct name, and you can see that we have the index along with the rest of the items that we were trying to deploy earlier. So, and you can see we also have a nice website URL here. HTML. And if we navigate to it, drum roll. Da, 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 da. All right, cool. So, success. And that's how it's done, folks. Don't give up. That's the main thing. That's the lesson from today. So
Nice. Yeah, teamwork.
yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. So nice participation from the group on this one. Thank you all. This is a group effort, so give yourself a round of applause and a pat on the back. But with that being said, does anybody have any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Yeah, one question. Did you do any kind of implementation for any enterprise applications?
I personally have not done any, I mean, I have worked on some enterprise applications, but anything with Pulumi, unfortunately, I have not had the chance to work on yet.
Okay. Like, or have you did any research on amount of work that goes in if we have to migrate from Terraform to this app?
That is a good question. As far as migration goes, I haven't personally done any research on migrating, but for the folks that are interested in looking into Pulumi, I would definitely suggest checking it out. And if you are interested in looking to move to Pulumi, I mean, definitely reach out to us here. You know, we do offer a lot of awesome services, and we're looking to expand our DevOps practices here as well. So, you know, migration from Terraform to Pulumi definitely would be something that could fall under that. And we'd be more than happy to look into it. But now that you mentioned that, I mean, I definitely think it would be something to look into, since this is kind of like the second time we talked about Pulumi, and you know, being able to manage infrastructure, especially for enterprises, is something huge, especially, you know, with our current economy. I know Tofker had touched on that during the our workshop last week, that, you know, money is very important these days. So
yeah, during your presentation or during the learning process curve, like how much of resources are available in the open source? Did you run into any roadblocks or with respect to open source resources?
So when preparing for this and just kind of working around with it, I haven't really run into many issues trying to get the information I was looking for. You know, I kind of picked something that was already offered by Pulumi, so it was pretty easy to kind of find what I was looking for. But I did kind of start doing a little bit of extra research, just kind of see, you know, what other languages do they offer. So for instance, like, you know, Swift, they don't have like Swift capability, things like that. There are some languages that they're still working on. But like I mentioned, their community is growing. Their Slack channel is pretty active. And so I would definitely recommend, you know, if there are any questions that you'd like answered immediately, you know, reach out to the Slack community. And because it is open source, they are, you know, very happy to you know, include others to contribute to it as well. And they do have documentation on how to, you know, add new languages if you want to, or integrate with other services. You know, I also mentioned there is some excellent examples, documentations on how to set up your projects in a specific way. It's like this one right here is just deploying a static site to an S3 bucket, but they have some more complex examples as well that we didn't really have enough time to go over in this demo. So I would definitely suggest, you know, reaching out to the Slack community, checking out the documentation, and then, you know, just kind of going from there.
Got it. Thank you.
Not a problem. Good questions. Thank you very much.
Well, James, that's even more interesting that, you know, you could potentially help port a whole nother language over as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
Well, James, thank you so much for that wonderful talk, and really some really good questions and good teamwork there too, everybody, on figuring out the problem. Thank you, Brian, for that excellent spot there. So join us next week. As I mentioned earlier, we are still doing our spring summit. So on Tuesday, as a reminder, our Kotlin multi-platform mobile workshop will be presented by our Android team on Tuesday at, I believe it's at 1:30 Eastern time. And then on Thursday next week at 1 o'clock Eastern time, our Java team will be going over gRPC with Java. And also next Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern at our usual lightning talk time, he's going to give us a talk on the TAN stack query. And TAN stack query provides an asynchronous state management for TypeScript, JavaScript, React, and others. And I'm Ted Parton, and thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next week.